Men's Hour. It's Richard Madeley, TV presenter, writer and radio presenter on BBC Radio 2, host of Men's Hour. He has hosted Men's Hour on BBC Radio 5 Live. Jane Garvey's part of this very special session. First voice, of course, ever on 5 Live and BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour presenter. And Harriet Minter, journalist and new co-host of Badass Women's Hour on Talk Radio. All three of them here. It's Women's Hour versus Men's Hour. Let's split the room and let's do it.
Feels like we're going up the scaffold. Right, well, thank you all very much for coming. It's still a beautiful day out there, just so you know. And we've got about 20 minutes, I think, here to talk about women in radio. So I'm going to start with Jane here, Jane Garvey. I mean, it's been going for 71 years, and I didn't realise it was that long. 71 years. What do you? There must be at the core of it.
Here we are this morning. Look.
Oh my God. Well, all right, I'll skip the opening question because this brings me to the second one. Woman's Hour was actually first produced and presented by men, wasn't it?
It was.
Woman's Hour by men.
October 1946 kicked off with a man presenting Woman's Hour, with the idea being that the little lady at home, in some cases, of course, women had been serving in part of the war effort, and food was still rationed and clothing was rationed in 1946. And women were more contained than they had been in the years of the war. And actually, to be blunt about it, a lot of women had had a really good time during the war. Their lives had changed. The women who lost husbands, by the way, and brothers and sons, obviously didn't have a good time, but you know what I mean.
Judy's mother had a great war. Your husband went away for 4 years.
How long have we been talking? We're already talking about Judy. This is what we want, Richard.
All right. No, we're talking about her mum.
Enough about Woman's Hour.
She had a great war. She didn't see her husband for 4 years, and she had a son to keep her company, and she had a good time. She had a good time.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of women did have a different sort of time, and they had more opportunities. But in 1946, they were very much back in the home. The men were coming home from the war, taking the jobs that the women had done, and so Woman's Hour was set up to keep women company in the home, and actually also on a practical level to teach them how they could make use of the food that was on the ration. So one of the first items they did was what you can do with your whale meat. It doesn't sound that exciting, does it?
No. So obviously the penny dropped quite early on. I think it was 6 months in that.
6 months he got the push, and you know how the BBC is so delicate about how it sacks people. It just, well, nowadays your security pass just doesn't work anymore.
Then you know.
Yeah, then you know. I think maybe he got a letter by carrier pigeon or something, and he was told.
And is there anything vestigial left from those very early months, maybe the first couple of years, within the programme, apart obviously from the title? Are there any remnants of what the show was when it was conceived?
I would say the interactivity with the audience was important in 1946.
Really? How did they do that?
Well, letters. I mean, we have got an archive to die for at Woman's Hour full of letters, and I've got the script of the original programme in 1946. Every single syllable was scripted. And indeed, the programme was rehearsed, and then there was a nice lunch. And then the editor, the presenter and the guests all had a formal lunch.
Oh, those are the days.
And they were the days. And then the programme was done again, where you read the script at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or whenever Mother's Story, or whatever it was.
And it's always been an hour. It's always been 60 minutes.
Well, it's 44 and a half minutes, actually, because then we have to have the serial.
Yeah, the story, yes, of course you do.
Where the Woman's Hour players pretend to be in Afghanistan. I find those dramas a little challenging, it has to be said.
Tell me, I mean, obviously, like all incredibly long-running institutionalised and institution programmes, it has evolved phenomenally. Would you say overall, certainly on your time on the show, that has been a spontaneous evolution, or is it always quite carefully crafted? Do you every now and again have great sort of head sessions where you sit around and you chew the fat and decide how to change the programme and move it forward, or does it evolve naturally?
Well, but none of it, by the way, if there were any great meetings, would involve the presenters, who are very much here today, gone tomorrow. I've only been there 9 years, so I'm known as the woman who isn't Jenny Murray still, or the new girl, or the other one. Or this morning when I was doing the programme, somebody tweeted just to say they didn't think Jenny was having a good morning. It was me. And I nearly read that out, actually, but Jenny would probably be listening, so I didn't want to...
Well, just to pick you up on this, hang on. Are you saying that the presenters have no power at all?
Well, we have a bit of power. I mean, I would say I've made a difference to the way the programme sounds. Yes. Jenny does it in her way, and I do it in a rather different way.
But you don't have any production power?
I have. So if I have an idea, I can hurl it into the mix along with everybody else. I mean, obviously, when I'm in front of a live microphone, Richard, they can't.
Absolutely.
Say what you like.
Absolutely.
Isn't it brilliant?
Yes, it is. It's great.
It's really good. It's quite addictive, I found, actually. That.
Well, you said I mentioned Judy, but I mean, just as a sort of comparison, when we started this morning in October 1988,
Yeah.
we had already been working together as a news partnership. But even so, and despite Judy being a feminist, and I hope I am too, even so, we noticed to begin with that the script seemed to be a bit loaded towards me and less towards her. And I remember we had a meeting after 3 days to put it right. The very opening link was, "Hello, I'm Richard Madeley, and this is my wife, Judy Finnegan." Yeah, isn't that awful? I feel shame. We both feel shame we let that happen. You obviously have male producers, I assume?
We often do. We don't have at the moment.
You don't? Okay. I was just going to say, without meaning to, the best intentioned of men can be sexist. Can't help it. It's just...
Are you digging a hole here, Richard?
No, not at all. Not at all. We all make mistakes. Not at all. I just wonder how you would deal with that on Woman's Hour if you had a male producer, you still haven't got one now, who you felt maybe had a few issues.
Well, I have worked with a lot of male producers over the years, and actually none of them have had any issues. And all of them, we sometimes have trainees, BBC production trainees, young lads, and they are young lads to me, they're about 21, 22. What they learn on Woman's Hour in the first 10 days.
Scars them for life.
It alters the course of their life in many cases, yeah. Because we do, let's be honest, we have, I mean, this morning was a usual crazy mix of items. Caroline Spellman trying to defend Theresa May, a little bit of a ding-dong between two academics about whether or not Jane Austen was an incestuous lesbian. Yesterday we did willow weaving, which was much more interesting than I thought it was going to be, in fairness to the woman I was talking
Okay, if you
to.
say so.
I mean, all of this stuff is out there, and we celebrate all forms of human life. No idea what your question was, but I'm on.
It doesn't matter. It's a flow of consciousness.
No, I think it's important that we have a male production element, and I think it's a shame that we don't have a male producer at the moment. Yeah. We do have over 40% of our regular audience are male.
Okay.
So that's important.
What do you say to this? It's got sort of wrinkles on it now. This criticism is so old. It's not so much a criticism, it's an observation. What do you say to those who say that the very title and the very concept of Woman's Hour in itself indicates that there's something wrong with women in radio, that you have to have your own corner?
Well, I mean, in 1946, there were no women in radio or on radio, as illustrated by the fact that the programme was presented by a man. So I think there were some women quite high up in BBC management at the time, but the BBC still had the marriage bar and all of that stuff. You couldn't work for the BBC as a married woman. This was real. So I think... I don't know, it's a brand, Woman's Hour now, and as a brand, it really punches above its weight. We get a lot, I mean, you could argue, we get a lot more publicity than a lot of other radio programmes precisely because of our name.
And before we move on here, who's your audience?
Who is our audience?
Who is your audience?
I am very, very passionate about our audience. I truly believe these people are the backbone of the nation. In some cases, I'm talking about women, perhaps in their early 60s, who are still working, maybe caring for their own parents, could also be caring for grandchildren and running a household, possibly have an adult child living at home. These women, this country could not function without those women on any level. And they form, I would say, a considerable chunk of our audience. But we also have young women. We have the most diverse audience, I think, of any programme on Radio 4 in terms of the relative youth at one end, so students engaging with Woman's Hour, and the social history we do, which is really important. And we have more ethnically diverse audience members than I would wager any other programme on Radio 4.
Two very quick questions to finish with you here. What's the proportion of male listeners? I listen all the time.
Over 40%.
Over 40%, that's really good, isn't it? I've forgotten the second question. Oh, yes. Second question is, suddenly you go in and you've been told not only does your past still work, but you're executive producer. You can change one thing about Woman's Hour. What would it be? I'd
make sure we had a regular non-white presenter.
Excellent. Good answer. Right. Now, let's talk to Harriet here. Harriet Minter, new to radio with Badass Woman's Hour. So badass kind of welcome to you. It's, for those people who don't understand what that is, what is Badass Woman's Hour and how does it differ from Woman's Hour?
So Badass Woman's Hour was, I mean, it started as a sort of shameless attempt to piggyback on the brand of Women's Hour. So it actually started as a live event. It wasn't a radio show. We ran it once a month. And it happened because a hotel came to one of my co-presenters and said, it's International Women's Day in 2 weeks. We want to do something for women. We've got no ideas. Can you put together an event? And we put together an event in, I think, 10 days. It sold out. We had 150 people there. They were like, this is great. Can you do it every month for us? And so, OK, we'll do a monthly event. And we did a monthly event, and we called it Badass Women's Hour because Woman's Hour is a recognisable brand, and we wanted something that people understood the concept of.
Well, what's badass about it?
We wanted it to be a bit more like the conversations you have with your mates over a cocktail. That was what we wanted.
Do you allow swearing? Do you allow swearing?
So in our live events, yes, totally do. On radio, we have to be a bit more...
Yeah.
We're kind of bound by some rules on that, but we totally allow it. And we wanted it to be, Women's Hour has to do 5 shows a week. We only do 1, so we get to be a bit kind of more condensed. And we just wanted it to be... We wanted to run the gamut. So we wanted to do serious stuff, but we also wanted to do stuff that was a bit lighter and a bit more personal.
And how long has it been running for now?
So the radio show has been running since January, and the event's been running for over a year.
And what of all those programmes that you've done are you most proud of?
Oh, God, great question. I think the one...
Don't worry, my mind goes blank when I'm asked questions.
Okay.
Monday, I don't have an answer. I'm not proud of any of it.
The one that I most remember is... the one that I kind of most remember is when we had Nimco Ali on talking about FGM, female genital mutilation.
Right, yes.
And she's a big campaigner for it, and she came on, and by the end of the show, we were pretty much all in tears. And from that, we just had emails, tweets, just people really contacting us saying, what can we do, what can we change, what can we contribute to? And that, for me, I felt was the one where people took the most action after it.
Okay.
I'm proud of that.
I don't think I phrased my question to you earlier quite the way I wanted to. I mean, what I was trying to say was, do you ever think, does it ever occur to you at all that there's something of tokenism about having Woman's Hour? Almost, here's your little bit, darling, have fun.
There is something about tokenism, but there's a reason for that. And so somebody gave me a stat the other day, 0.4% of radio shows in the UK are presented by a group of women, right? That's why you need them. That's why you need a bit of tokenism, because there aren't enough of them. And so I'm sorry, but while we still do not have enough, while it's still an odd thing, it's going to be tokenism, and you've got to make an effort for it.
Why is that, do you think? I mean, I do a lot of work for Radio 2, and of course there are women presenters on Radio 2, but mostly through the day it's men. Why do you think that is? Not necessarily there, but generally in radio, that it's male voices we hear.
Yeah, sure. So I think what it comes down to is unconscious bias. So prior to doing this, I actually worked for The Guardian, and I ran a section there called Women in Leadership, which was why
So women in what? Leadership?
Women in leadership. Why we didn't have more women at the top of all industries. And the problem was pretty much the same for every single industry, which is when you look at the people at the top, they are traditionally white men. And we are all, regardless of our race, gender, sexuality, conditioned to like people who are like us. And so if we don't think about it, if we don't make an effort to look for diversity, we just hire the same people again and again and again.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think that's what's happened with radio. And hopefully for me, the great thing about radio is stuff seems to last quite a long time on it. So change seems to be a little slow. And I think that's why we're in the position we are, but I think maybe it's time for a bit of...
And how do you do that? How do you affect change? How do you get more women broadcasters on? How do you take jobs away from some of the men, some of the old farts like me, and give it to women?
So I think you are really honest about what's working and what's not. You are really honest about what you could potentially be changing. You are really honest about the areas you could take some risks in. You look at kind of what are the other ways of broadcasting that you're not already doing. So actually, could the BBC create a really amazing female podcaster that they build up, and she creates a whole brand for herself? Instantly move across to Radio 2.
Where did the canard, and it was a canard, come from that women didn't like listening to women?
It's a made-up fact.
It's
fake news.
It's fake news. It's fake news.
Yeah.
Because there's never been a smidgen of research. I Googled it, actually. I spent about half an hour looking all over the place to see if I could see an original document. I can't find anything. It's just one of those dreadful lies.
It is, and the problem is that we say that, and then somebody somewhere goes, oh no, that's a fact. That's the thing. Women don't like listening to women. Women don't work well with other women. Women at the top put down other women. All these things, and actually, the research isn't there to back it up. So let's stop saying it.
It seems then, based on what we've just been saying about the lack of women broadcasters generally across the networks and in local radio, that let's just talk about the BBC. That therefore, by definition, the BBC is sexist.
Ooh, do you know what? Yeah,
why has there never been a female director general? I have no...
Great question.
We've even had female prime ministers. It's astonishing. I simply cannot believe that there hasn't been a woman capable of doing that
Absolutely.
job.
But when you go to work, you come from New Broadcasting House?
Yes.
Yeah. When you go through those doors, do you reflect, as a practising feminist, do you think, this place is still a bit sexist?
Practising. I put in hours of practice.
I haven't quite got it right yet.
No, I'm still...
You'll get it right one day, I can assure you.
I mean, I've got the pedicure, for example. I agonise over this. Should I be going for this? I don't really know. in the end, I go for. Well, of course, I don't feel. I'm in the most. I work for Women's Hour. I work with the Britain's feminists. We're deep undercover at broadcasting.
Well, I said this to you when I met you in the green room a few minutes ago. I must say this. I'm very interested in politics, and I watch and listen to everything I can. I'm sort of Jeremy Vine in that regard. I'm obsessed with it. I thought Women's Hour had the best election of any programme on radio or television. I thought the Women's Hour election coverage was absolutely brilliant. You held politicians' feet to the fire without actually being rude to them.
Well, can I say, actually, of course, Emma Barnett was the presenter. I was on holiday. Can you imagine how irritated?
Yeah, I bet you were. Yeah.
Be on holiday, and one of my colleagues sent an image of the top trend in the UK, which was the bloody Woman's Hour studio in London. I didn't care how nice the weather was in sodding Marrakesh that day. I was absolutely living. But Emma did a brilliant job, and I think, was it Nick Cohen, the journalist, tweeted afterwards, what was it that stopped Jeremy's team researching that interview properly? Was it misogyny or ignorance?
That's a very good question.
And I do think that is a really, really good point, that to consistently underestimate this programme that has been going for over 70 years is really not on.
Well, I thought your election special coverages was peerless, actually. I really mean that. I thought it was excellent. Oh, well, we're out of time, but let's take 2 questions from the audience very quickly. Anybody want to throw something in? Or have we covered all the ground so beautifully and competently that there's nothing left to talk about? Okay, I'm getting a 5-second countdown here. This is a bit like a quiz show. No questions? No, okay. In that case, perfect timing. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for being here.